summit will go on. That is the message from the White House as President Trump will likely hit the links today.
Yeah, the president at his golf resort in Scotland ahead of his Monday meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin, despite these growing calls for the summit to be canceled. And here's why. 12 Russian intelligence officials are now facing charges for interfering in the 2016 election.
President Trump's response, I'm still innocent. I'm still the victim of a rigged witch hunt, and I'm still hoping for a good relationship with Vladimir Putin.
Jeremy Diamond is in Glasgow, where the president, of course, is this morning. Jeremy, what are you hearing?
Well, the president is up and already tweeting here this morning in Scotland. We saw him take to Twitter to address for the first time this indictment of 12 Russian nationals related to Russian meddling in the 2016 campaign, the hacking in particular of Democratic emails. The president, though, is not necessarily bemoaning the Russian actions. Instead, his focus appears to be on the fact that this occurred during the Obama administration. The president tweeting the stories you heard yesterday about the 12 Russians took place during the Obama administration, not the Trump administration, and wondering why President Obama and his administration didn't do more to stop this. This is the second reaction that we've heard from the White House, the first from the president. But yesterday, White House Deputy Press Secretary Lindsay Walters put out a statement from the White House addressing these indictments. And she didn't focus on the Russian actions here or Russian intervention in the election. Instead, it was quite a defensive statement, pointing out today's charges include no allegations of knowing involvement by anyone on the campaign and no allegations that the alleged hacking affected the election results. This is consistent with what we have been saying all along. Notable, first of all, that she is referring to the alleged hacking here, even though we do know that emails were indeed hacked during the 2016 election. And furthermore, the focus again here is really on defending the president and his campaign from any suggestion that they were involved in any of these Russian activities. All of this, of course, coming as the president prepares for his meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin. U.S. officials have touted this as the first of these kind of high-level summit between the two leaders. It'll be their most extensive meeting to date. And so far, the president has already indicated that he does plan to raise election meddling once again. He said so several times this week during news conferences. But at the same time, the president yesterday, speaking alongside the British Prime Minister Theresa May, making clear that he doesn't believe Russian actions are the biggest impediment to improving U.S.-Russia relations. In fact, the president instead pointed to politics in the United States, stupidity, as he called it, of this partisanship surrounding the Russia inquiry and the special counsel's investigation, which, of course, he has branded a witch hunt. Back to you guys.
All right, Jeremy Diamond for us there in Glasgow. Thank you. Meanwhile, anti-Trump protests are due to kick off in Scotland next hour. Phil Black is in the city of Edinburgh. Phil, what are you seeing there, if anything, at this hour?
Victor, good morning. Donald Trump arrived here late last night, as we know, and even before he arrived, there was a big protest underway in Glasgow, the city there, a number approaching 2,000 telling the president that he wasn't welcome. Here in Edinburgh, an even bigger protest is expected to begin in about an hour's time, and that is also, we're told, going to see the return of the Trump baby balloon, which was transported up here overnight on a train from London. The other focus of protests here in Scotland is Turnberry, the Trump golf resort where the president is staying. And we saw an extraordinary moment there yesterday when a paraglider piloted by a Greenpeace activist flew very close to the hotel there, trailing an anti-Trump banner. Now, the pilot of that paraglider escaped, but the police say they are hunting that person because there are airspace restrictions in place over the hotel in order to protect the president, and violating them, the police say, is a criminal offence. One of the things that has annoyed some people here is the fact that this is not a working visit for the president. It's essentially private time. He'll be staying at his resort, not meeting with Scottish government officials. So there are some people, political leaders, who are annoyed because they believe it's unfair that Scotland is being left with a big bill for security and protection, millions of dollars, while they say the president is simply here to play golf and check in on his business interests. Victor, Christie.
All right, Phil Black, thank you so much. Appreciate the update. Now, let's remember, from here, from Scotland, President Trump is heading to Finland for that one-on-one meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin. That happens on Monday.
Yes, but just yesterday, the Mueller team indicted 12 Russians accused of hacking Democrats' computers. This was during the presidential campaign. And although many lawmakers are calling for the meeting to be canceled, the White House says the summit will go on. CNN senior international correspondent Matthew Chance is live in Helsinki for us. Matthew, the president says that he will absolutely bring this up, but he says that he'll firmly ask.
Right. I mean, look, the tone in which this conversation is going to be had with Vladimir Putin by President Trump, it's been unclear. I mean, he's always said that he would bring up this issue of Russian interference in the U.S. political system. But, I mean, the fact is that the Kremlin and the White House speak with a single voice on this issue. They use the same language. I mean, there was a reaction to these 12 indictments from the Russian Foreign Ministry that came out last night, just after the indictments were announced. And they said it is fake news. In the past, they've called it a witch hunt, exactly the same term that President Trump uses. And the Russians, whether it's the Kremlin or the Foreign Ministry, they always cast this as a politically motivated allegation to undermine their standing on the international stage, but also, crucially, to undermine Donald Trump amongst his political opponents, in the United States. And that's very much, the kind of language that Donald Trump likes to hear. It's how he speaks about these collusion allegations himself. And so, far from being a point of confrontation between the two sides, this issue of election meddling, it actually looks from here like something that the presidents could both agree on, which is an extraordinary situation, of course, to be in, Victor.
There was an article written in Time magazine by a woman that we're going to talk to in just a little bit. And she said, at the end of the day, Putin has basically already won because in terms of optics, he plays the game better than President Trump does. With that said, do the optics matter so much in Russia as much as they do around the rest of the world? Do those optics, are they the same? Does Russia view the optics of Putin the same way that other world leaders would when they compare these two people, these two leaders?
Well, Christy, I think the optics are important, but they're not seen in the same way, if you catch my meaning. Look, I mean, this meeting for Vladimir Putin is extremely important. It's important that it's taking place at all. Remember, Putin has been isolated by much of the international community over the past couple of years for a whole range of what's been characterized as malign activity, from the annexation of Crimea in 2014 to the shooting down of MH17, that civilian airliner, which, by the way, the 4th anniversary of that is just the day after the presidential summit, from his support for Bashar al-Assad in Syria, the poisoning recently with a chemical weapon in Britain. All of this has led to sanctions, isolation, condemnation from the international community. And so the fact that Putin is back at the top table, meeting one-on-one with the President of the United States, is in itself a victory. They're also going to be looking for any concessions that Trump might give. The president has already suggested, by the way, when he was at the NATO meeting a few days ago, that if President Putin asks it, he will stop military exercises in the Baltics. And so, Putin is going to be clever about this, I suspect, and he's going to take whatever he can.
All right, Matthew Chance for us there in Helsinki, the site of that summit on Monday between Presidents Putin and Trump. Thank you very much.
Matthew, thank you. So the president prepares to meet with Vladimir Putin. And he's doing this just days after 12 Russians are charged with meddling in the 2016 election. And we now know that the president knew those indictments were coming.
Yes.
Even when he had some interesting things to say yesterday at the podium about the indictments and about his meeting with Putin. Well, Trump is facing growing pressure to confront Vladimir Putin or cancel their Monday summit altogether. This, of course, after these 12 Russian agents were charged with trying to influence the 2016 election.
The White House says this meeting will go on. And as recently as yesterday, President Trump is still calling the Mueller probe a witch hunt, despite the fact that Robert Mueller has now brought 191 criminal charges against 32 people and 3 companies so far.
So reporter and co-author of Playbook at Politico, Daniel Lippman, and CNN legal analyst Joey Jackson. Gentlemen, thank you both for being here. Joey, I want to ask you first and foremost, as we look at the big picture here, what is the significance of these latest indictments?
Good morning, Christy. Good morning, Victor. Look, here's the reality. The significance is that it confirms I don't know how much more you can confirm and dispute and refute any notion of a witch hunt, that Russia was just completely involved in the, attacking in a cyber fashion of the system as it relates to the elections. The allegations in the indictment, Christy, are very specific, and these are just not people in Russia who had nothing better to do, who were just out there saying, let me interfere one day. These are intelligence officers, and if intelligence officers are so intricately involved in hacking of the system, the Democratic National Committee, the Democratic Congressional Committee, just in this massive cyber attack, it makes you wonder. I wonder who directed that attack, and I wonder how high that official was. It comes right back to Putin, in my view, and so I really would believe that any notion of some type of witch hunt or this is nonsense, that has to be refuted.
Yeah, national security experts say this could not have gone on without Putin's approval. So with that said, Daniel, when we look ahead to Monday's meeting, if President Trump does not very boldly and aggressively confront President Putin on this, can this meeting can it be called or characterized as successful, or would it be a failure at that point?
Yeah, you have to remember the meeting with Kim Jong-un in Singapore, where the first few hours of coverage of that meeting was pretty positive. Things seemed to be going well, and yet we saw in the letter that Kim sent a few days ago, no mention of denuclearization.
I'm glad to have you here. I'm Christy Paul.
I'm Victor Blackwell. Good Saturday to you. President Trump plans to keep his date with